My name is Susan Durnan, and I am the Administration Lead of the Mississauga Arts Council. We would like to thank you for joining us today for Day 1 of TD Culture Lab Explore Publishing Workshop, sponsored by TD Bank Group and presented by Mississauga Arts Council in collaboration with Courtney Park Writers Group and Mississauga Writers Group. The Mississauga Arts Council is dedicated to enabling the growth of the arts by creating opportunity and connection between artists and residents in Mississauga and beyond. Celebrating our milestone 40th anniversary this year, the Mississauga Arts Council is a registered charity dedicated to accelerating progress toward the attainment of our vision of Mississauga as a vibrant cultural community where arts and culture thrive. Our mission is to empower the arts economy by creating more opportunities and capacity, connecting artists to audiences and each other, and celebrating artists' achievements. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe Chippewa, Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. TD Culture Lab Explore Publishing is a 2-day virtual workshop engaging local writers through informational webinars, panel discussions, and networking opportunities on the topic of publishing. Our workshop will explore all publishing forms, including self, indie, and traditional publishing. In today's session, we will learn about the experience of traditional publishing. So let's get started. Please welcome Elizabeth Benfalvey of Mississauga Writers Group, who will introduce our speakers for the traditional publishing portion of today's workshop.
Thank you. For many years, Mary Ellen has been operating her public relation biz, MEK Specialty Services, Inc., which is www.mekspecialty.com. She works with authors, assisting them in promoting themselves and their books. She also arranges online book launches. Besides writing press releases, she writes short stories and poetry that have been published in various anthologies. She has been chairing the Courtney Park Writers Group for the past 12 years. It's a wonderful group comprised of many talented writers, she indicates. They inspire and keep her writing and supporting her members. Okay, Mary Ellen, go right ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be starting off our second portion of this presentation. And I want to thank you, Elizabeth, with you and Belinda. I learned so much about the self-publishing world. So thank you for that. Okay, as far as our traditional publishing, there is our table of content. And I think if introduction, and then we'll go with Pratap Reddy's bio. And I think Elizabeth's going to read that later. And I think, Susan, if you want to pull up the introduction, and I'm just going to read it. Yes, okay. This is kind of what this our section of the traditional publishing is going to be. It's going to afford a writer the opportunity to learn firsthand what it takes to become a traditional published author. And we'll hear directly from Pratap Reddy. He's been there twice. He has 2 books that have been traditionally published. He can give you all the ins and outs. And we have writers participating in the online webinar. They have a chance to ask him straightforward questions concerning the issues he faced and the final outcome. And also Pratap, our guest speaker, will discuss the steps he took to successfully work closely with the publisher, who incidentally did publish 2 of his books. So he was very fortunate indeed. The aspiring writer is anticipating that the publisher will showcase his or her written work in a book in the most favorable light. And on the other end of the spectrum, the publisher is looking at this as a business venture, as to how many books they plan to publish annually, and with an eye cast to book sales. Naturally, the end result, both sides are hoping this venture will be mutually beneficial and of course produce a bestseller. So that's kind of what we're going to be all about as far as we're going to be having a nice chat with guest speaker Pratap. And I believe Elizabeth was going to read Pratap's bio. Oh, I think she's muted. Okay. Okay, I'll read it.
I do that all the time.
Okay, I know I do too.
Pratap immigrated from India along with his family more than 15 years ago. He lives in Mississauga, working as an underwriter by day and a writer by night. He brought his childhood dream to fruition to become a published author in Canada. However, the literary journey, not surprisingly, was no cakewalk. Pratap feels, although with the advice and help from the writing fraternity, my infantile, in every sense of the word, ambition became a reality. In fact, he successfully distilled the immigrant experience into his fiction. An alumnus of the Humber School of Writers, he was awarded a Marty by the Mississauga Arts Council in 2008. His work was selected by, Diaspora Dialogues for their mentoring programs. Can we have the next page? He has written 2 books, a collection, Weather Permitting and Other Stories, and Ramya's Treasure, a novel. One of the most enjoyable outcomes of becoming a writer, Pratap says, was the opportunity he received to participate in a book tour arranged by his publisher, Guernica Editions of Western Canada, in the fall of 2019. His short story, The Lime Tree, was published in the anthology Changing the Face of Canadian Literature, which was named by the CBC as the best of 2020. He also compiled a book-length collection titled Remanded People and Other Stories, which is yet to be published. He is presently working on his second novel. We are happy to introduce Pratap Reddy as our inspirational guest speaker. He will share with you the challenges and rewards of becoming a published author. Pratap.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. So Pratap will just be taking the floor in a moment. I just want to mention, I'm so happy to have Pratap with us today. It won't be a formal interview as such. It'll be more like a friendly conversation. As I've known Pratap for many years, he's a friend of mine, and we've worked together, and I've helped him promote his books. And I've learned so much from Pratap. He is the best person when you're in a book signing, like perhaps at Chapters. They'll pile a whole load of books on top of your signing desk, and he will sell every single one of them. He's amazing. And one trait that Pratap has in spades is persistence, and he never gives up. And we all know that as writers, you need that trait. So let's open the floor with our conversation. Pratap, can we see you? So Elizabeth, if you want to put the latest screen down. Okay, here I have all these questions that I am going to ask him directly. Okay, but you can kind of take a look. So Pratap, are you there? Can we see you?
I think he just needs to hit the unmute button.
Okay, is Pratap, are you on mute?
Okay, can you see me there?
It is. Okay,
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so the first question, and I want to mention too, we're going to have, for the audience's benefit, at the end of our conversation, we're having a question and answer period. And you can ask him the questions directly. I think it's more personal than rather than putting them in the chat. For Pratap, he's a very personal type person. Okay, Pratap, first out of the gate, why the hell did you want to become a writer of all things?
Before I answer that $64,000 question, I apologize for my COVID hairstyle, but you know, this dreadful germ has taught us many things in life. Yes, coming back to a question, Marianne, why would anyone, when there are hundreds of professions that want to become a writer? Only a child, maybe a backward child like me, wanted to become one. I come from India, which is a British Commonwealth country, and English, right? Though the 1 billion people don't speak English, but it's still the language of most of education, business, and social activities. Many of these English writers like Agatha Christie, Alistair MacLean, and they were so famous in India. And then India was a socialist country then, and there were not many distractions. So people were apt to read a lot those days. In fact, my generation was called by Indian sociologists as the bookworm generation. So it's not surprising that I would want to, become a writer, because these authors, they opened these wonderful vistas of adventure and travel. And for me, they were nothing short of magicians. When you see a work of art, one can understand to see a painting, the color, the form, but you open a book, it could be a tattered book, brown pages with black squiggles in a series, but it communicates in your brain. But what fantastic images it creates. So right from my childhood days, in a very foolhardy way, I wanted to become a writer. So I don't know, that answers. And especially, once you succeed, and then you realize how, like, it's hard, it doesn't pay well at all. Even then, there is great satisfaction, even if it can't sort of feed your family, but there is a lot of satisfaction in becoming a writer.
Well, and you've proved to be a successful writer as well, so that's something. Speaking about the hair, I've been cutting my own too, so if you like, I could give you a trim.
Yeah, now that there is self-publishing, there must be also I suppose.
That's right.
That's
it. I know the last time I went to my editor, she said, "Who cut your hair?" It was there great big chunks were missing at the back. I said, "Oh, I've done it." So we just have to get through this with our hair, however it is. Okay, the second question I want to ask you, can you please relate some of your experiences while you were trying to become published? And I know this is a huge challenge for you, but you did it. Go ahead.
Surprisingly, Mary Ellen, the very first short story got published. And that alarmed me. And I knew what is going to come next. Like, it's almost the typical, when you're first time lucky, it doesn't work out. This was published by a glossy fashion South Asian magazine called Anoki, which had more of half-dressed or ill-dressed people. And, it had a very trendy kind of, it was not at all a literary forum. But after that, it was all downhill. After all, I didn't come from South Asia to be published in a South Asian magazine, even if it was in Canada, produced by South Asians for South Asians, right? I wanted to be a writer in the mainstream kind of. So after that, I tried sending stories for competitions, for, like, whenever I came across a submission call, I would sort of respond to it, but zilch, nothing worked. And this was, it kind of, though I'm not the kind to get depressed at all, but it was creating a kind of pressure. And I was looking for any venue, where I could share my stories, or, my, read out perhaps, or whatever venue. Then someone suggested about Mississauga Arts Council's open mic sessions. It was being held in, in a coffee shop very close to Mississauga, into Square One. And I called Mississauga Arts Council, but they said short stories. No, we only, it's a, it's a forum for poets, musicians, balladeers, all kinds of, but prose, no. And then I remember, the person, why don't you write a poem? As if, yeah, I called writers magicians, but I was not yet a writer to pull out like a rabbit out of a hat, a poem. But nevertheless, this happened on a Friday, and on the coming Sunday was the open mic. So I sat down and wrote a poem. One thing I was very sure of is that I don't have to follow meters. Modern poetry is something that it could sound very much, it could be prose which can masquerade as poem kind of. All you have to do is, break that long sentences. Pujita, don't take objection. And then I composed this poem and I read out, and I called it Second Thoughts, Second Cup, because the location was a Second Cup cafe. So I read out, and then obviously Mississauga Council liked it because they published it in their bulletin. And there it was, my second piece getting published in Mississauga Arts Council. And then there was this conversation. Eventually, I sent my stories, and that particular year, even without having a book published, I won the Marties, on the strength of the short stories I sent, which were yet unpublished. So that was my experience of that. That was the very first. And then there was this drought period where again I was trying to send stories and all that, and more about it later. And yeah, it's not as I said, cakewalk being a writer. There are
Oh, no.
many downs, few ups, but whatever, the ride is great. That's all I can say as a writer. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Now, can you tell us how many submissions did you send out to traditional publishers? Because that's the route you wanted to take.
See, truth to tell, I didn't send out more than, I think, half a dozen, because see, I was an immigrant come to a strange country, and also maybe I didn't have this kind of confidence over that I could approach anybody in Canada and just send, which was, my English also was, partly formal Indian English, which was actually a carryover from the British when they ruled us. That part, it's a part Victorian and, part modern. So I didn't have that. So I did send on recommendations of my friends. But those intervening years, right? I was an immigrant working as a security guard, living out of a basement. My wife she didn't have a career in India. Here, she had to look for a job, and my sons all education and all that. But those intervening years gave me these experiences, right, of being a new immigrant, the struggles, the challenges, which I converted to stories, right? So I took some time before I could put all these stories together, but it was like I didn't come to Canada as a full-blown writer. I came with a very larger than life dream, but that's about all. Nothing more substantial than that. So these years sort of, right? So I didn't send many, and the sixth one proved to be lucky, kind of. Yeah.
So the sixth, that's when Guernica.
Yeah.
Okay, we
right.
want to publish your book. Yeah. Actually, I should mention that Michael Marola of Guernica Editions is going to be a member of our panelists for the April 30th.
And also, just one thing I like to share with wannabe writers is, don't be very hesitating, about sending it to a publisher, and try top down, because I'm a financial analyst by profession. See, the smallest publisher who might have only 6 books a year, for him, it is most difficult to accommodate, another kind of writer. They'll have less elbow room. Their markets are well defined. So your chances of getting into those 6 books a year or 12 books a year might be harder. We think a smaller publisher will accept, like a writer without a reputation, a first-time writer, but it doesn't happen, because after all, publishing is a financial activity, right? So don't hesitate. But there is the downside, being that publishers take 6 months to get back to you or more, but it happens even for a short story. And sometimes about simultaneous or multiple submissions, right? I don't even know if publishers sort of give weightage. I don't know, because they have to pay for editors. So I don't know how successful it is. If somebody has submitted multiple submissions and were successful, I would like to hear from them. But otherwise, many a times when I sent with that note multiple submissions, I didn't find any success. It's just okay. Sorry to interrupt you, Mary.
That's all right. That's fine. No, I wondered, and while we're still on the subject of submissions, did you revise them? The sixth one turned out to be Lucky. Guernica took you on as an author and published your manuscript. Did you continue to revise it and edit it, kind of tailor it to each publisher, or did you just send out the same one? How did you handle that?
See, I didn't deliberately set out to revise or edit. Though I realized that, that my first draft, which actually I had written when I was in actually a creative writing school. It was, I thought, a bit clumsy and clunky, but the revisions happened because as I started, approaching magazines or whatever anthologies, and I was getting accepted, I had to perforce condense my stories or revise them rather than rewriting them. So they got revised, as a matter of course. And also, I had applied to Diaspora Dialogues. They had run this competition for immigrant writers, not necessarily of visible minorities. For example, even white American could qualify for Diaspora Dialogues, their programs and their competition, or even a white person from South Africa or anywhere, Europe. So I applied to Diaspora Dialogues. And the third time, and this is once more I'm saying third time, is because if you're a writer, you need to be persistent. You need to sort of try again and again, not to get too disappointed that you will say, I'm done, it's enough. No, keep trying again. And every time you try, you get better. And as a famous poet said, and every time you fail, hopefully you fail better, So a third time it was accepted, and the prize was actually in Diaspora Dialogues. They provide an expert writer as your mentor. So my story got published, got mentored, and well, that's how it was. And also, second time round, I submitted for this competition my entire manuscript. Again, I won the prize. They take about a dozen writers, right? And once again, they provided with a mentor my entire collection, who went through it, suggesting improvements and all. And they will, and also I like to share, they won't do it in such a way that you have to completely rewrite, but what they do is that they are published writers, they are very good at their job. So to enhance your story, right, to make it more communicable, so that more people can access your story, right? If I were to write purely Indian English or in an extremely sort of narrow-minded way, if I were to write something, it would not be found to be sort of very accessible to people. So mentoring by itself, I didn't find it that they were interfering with my work too much. They would always give, if you said no, it meant no, sort of, yeah. So that's how it was that my work got edited. And then by then, when I sent to Guernica, it was this edited work which I sent out. So maybe
Okay, so it
that
was.
could be a reason. Yeah, that could be a reason too.
Well, that was good. Thank you. You did answer my next question. I mean, I was wondering how you remained optimistic and focused through many rejections. Actually, we were talking about rejections this morning.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? You mentioned persistence, but I mean, you didn't give up on yourself. You still felt that you had what it takes to become a published author. How did you handle that?
See, however ill-founded, it's my dream. Yeah, right. I'm going to stick to my dream. But before that, I just want to say that, rejections with me personally don't lead to dejection. There is always a disappointment, and it comes from if you are put together. In those days when I was first trying to be published, you had to send that entire hard copy of the manuscript. You have it photocopied, you go to Canada Post, put it in a box, pay, that. And these manuscripts are not, it's not
those were
not cheap.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
cheap. And then, and to say that, there is a disappointment associated. When you have taken all this trouble, you would want a yes. But having said that, I would not feel, sort of very depressed or something. Or I wanted to write. That is the key. I will
Well, that
continue
was
to
it.
write, you know.
No matter what, you were able.
Sooner or later, perhaps never, it might not happen, but that writing would be within me, right? So even if people, well, it is their bad luck if they can't, but it is there. I'm writing, it is there in my mind, in my thoughts, and it's there in my being. So I would not I wouldn't have minded if I didn't get published at all, but it would be a disappointment, no doubt. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You answered that. Okay. Now, what exactly were the steps you had to take before becoming a, you had to work with the person who was doing the editing. Did you find that difficult? I know some people are really shy about working with the person who's doing the editing. How did you feel about that?
Actually,
That's one of the big steps.
yeah, I had 4 mentors, editors. You know, first to answer this question on editing, because that is not my journey of, you know, it was when I came to the end, that's when all these mentors, they all appeared kind of, right? When I was struggling with just this sort of having written the first stories and then trying to peddle my stuff. But these mentors, often they are very cooperative, or, you know, but they are, editors in Guernica, like everything about Guernica, you know, wonderful, right? So it's, I suppose once that organization is like that, it sort of percolates to every aspect. So they're very accommodating and very helpful, creative and all. So I had no problem. It's just something I still dread if I were to, it's like some other publisher, how it would turn out, you know, because you hear stories. But for me with Guernica, it was not a problem.
You're right, because that kind of, a lot of writers shy away from, you know, trying to be traditionally published for that reason, because they're kind of afraid of what the editing process is going to be if they lose their voice, you know, within their story. You know, they're kind of apprehensive. But you were very fortunate then with Guernica. They certainly worked with you, but in a way that you kept your story intact. You kept the voice very strong in your novel.
And also, Mary Ellen, this journey of being a published writer, right? So I told you, first time I got lucky, but I had this very good working relationship with the editor. So then I asked her after 2 or 3 years, right? Like, how is it that one gets published? And, you know, like, for me, that looking to get published was so much like that immigrants first in my stories, you can trying to find a job, right? It was so hard. And at least I think for local people finding a job, for my son, it's not going to be hard, but to get a publisher, even for a local person, I think it's just about as hard. For an immigrant, it might be adding another layer. So how does one, that's what I asked. Then she gave me the best piece of advice, but many of you are already, you know, in these literary groups. She said, become part of the local writing community, you know. So, and then I was until then a writer, as I said, you know, writing early in the mornings, late in the nights, and having this day job. And then I made these efforts to, and then she introduced me to the festival that was going on. It was called Masti Masala Mehndi, some very South Asian. So I approached them, but that particular year, they couldn't accommodate me because it was coming up 2 weeks later, but they did next year. This is one more thing. Try again, you know, rejection is never a rejection for good. So, and then I joined writing groups. There was a association called Desi Lit. So they had writing groups, they had book clubs. They didn't last long, but they gave me sort of a kind of, you know, like entree to people who are into literature, writing community and all. And in one of the readings of Mississauga Arts Council, Mary Ellen, Cheryl is one of her, you know, friends from Courtney Park. She heard my poems, this quickly, you know, slap together poems sort of, right? And then she invited me to Courtney Park. That's how I got into Courtney Park, came to know, you know, that's how one thing leads to another. It's always one thing leads to another sort of. So become part of, many of you all are already, that's good. But for those who are aspiring writers, not yet, just don't go there to see that if I go there, this is going to happen. No, you never know what is, you know, one thing will lead to another. You might get contacts, you might be able to improve your work, or so many, you know, people share their strategies and what they have done. So That was the most important piece of advice I got. Become part of the
Agreed.
local writing.
Because I think
Yeah, like,
you know that you're not alone then.
yes. And
So we've been
yeah,
so glad to have you.
I made lifelong friends, you know.
I
That's,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. We've been, out and about and around the band for a long time, but I think that's very important when you are involved with a writing community. I think everybody mentioned it this morning as well, and you're, just kind of re-emphasizing it. It's a very important issue. Okay. Now, my next question is, how long did it take you actually to land your contract with Guernica Editions?
Hmm. It took me a long time. I told you, right? Because what really happens is the very second year I was in Canada, I took a very expensive creative writing course. It was like, what do you call that? Distance learning kind of a thing. And superb mentoring I got, that learning of all that. And this package, right? It came with the promise of having a literary agent, and like they would help in opening a venue for public publishing. After I finished the course, I sent the manuscript to the literary agent. She's in turn sent it to a reader. That's the correct way of doing things. And the readers, the reaction was actually, it was a song of praise, if I may say. But the literary agent, again, quite correctly, because, have all said and done, publishing is not an art form. It is a financial activity. It's a business activity. She
Right.
said, that short stories don't sell. And I would hear it again and again and again. Sometimes the anthologies, the publisher said they won't make more than $20 a book, that writer. So she said that, after all this kind of, and that made, uh, I was quite, again, not different, extremely disappointed. And incidentally, my mentor was this great Canadian writer, Elizabeth Howe. And actually, in the very early stages itself, she called me to say that, why don't you, she liked many of my stories. One of the stories, she said, I must expand it into a novel. But I was struggling on every front, living in a basement, working a security guard job in the evenings, daytime working with this insurance company, Canada Life. And I don't think I have the patience now to expand a short story into I'm not a writer, this was just a dream to become a writer, right? So it was even then I got that first sort of intimation that short stories don't sell. But didn't I tell you, very persistent. So I don't give up. So even then I had an idea for a novel, but I started pushing my short stories. It got, yeah, sold or whatever. And it did very well in, I suppose, in all these book signings and all that.
Well, I
So
think you're right. I've heard that before so many times. Short stories don't sell, but now collections of short stories are very popular. And you're right, they weren't at one point. They just weren't selling it, and publishers weren't interested. I'm going to change my question because I did receive a question through the chat. And this is your publisher, Michael Marola. He is here from Guernica. He's online. And he is asking, did you consider ever self-publishing? I think when you may be getting at the discouraging point, did you?
Actually, Michael, not then, because I had that, and I also partly because I knew very little about publishing, So it was self-publishing was not there at all, on my radar then. But nowadays, I still don't mind getting self-published because who knows, I can churn out a bestseller and rope in all those millions for myself. Now, now I'm
right, the million.
little. Yeah, but then it was not there at all. It was there, and then this was. I don't know. It's a good thing or a bad thing to be. If I had a bit in my mouth, I would not let go at all. Sort of. So it was just second nature, just to keep trying. Who knows? Like who might like my story, or like, I mean, I've not run through all the list of publishers,
Oh,
right?
so you
And
still felt there was a chance that you'd be judicially published. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good. You ran with it. Yeah, didn't you? Okay, no, that's
and
great.
just a thing, Mary Ellen, because for new writers, right? I didn't have this because I didn't know, right? Those early years of after immigrating to Canada. I don't know if you can see a book like this, Writers Market, and there is that Canadian Writers Market. So, they list out all, if you buy the latest one, and it arranges Canadian publishers, the kind of books they would like. So you don't end up sending it to a publisher and then wait for 6 months to know that he doesn't publish your books at all, and then it gives you their website so you can go and see, and then uh, the names of the current head, so that it looks good when you send your query letter that you're addressing the right person and all that. It's a very, very useful if you're first time writer, or so that you have a better that that lie of the land, right? And it helps, so I just thought I'll share it with you. Yeah.
Well, thank you with that. Now you answered about how did you actually feel when you had your contract in place with Guernica? Tell us about that. And then there's the second part of the question is, and how did you build up your confidence then for the next step, which is promoting your book, because you need a lot of confidence there in that step.
First, when I got that, I was very happy. That's about all. But Guernica being Guernica, my book was coming 3 years down the road, because a publisher like Guernica will have so many, like manuscript and all which they have. Okay. So that kind of took the guilt off the gingerbread, So 3 years down there, it's not, you don't get very excited so many
Takes
months
a while,
in
you have to
advance.
build the excitement.
But I will tell you this, and my publisher, right? So they had this very creative person do the book cover. And after he did that, and I opened that email to see the book cover, the joy I felt.
Well, that when it's
I
finally in your
put my
hand.
friend onto the screen and touched it. It was not even in a book form, but the sheer pleasure of seeing. And it was a lovely, creative, humorous kind of cover too.
I love
And
that.
then it had, I know it's here. So I
That's
just
your
want
weather.
to show
Hold it
it.
up.
Yeah.
Yes, hold
See
it
that,
up.
yeah.
Hold it up
Weather
higher.
permitting,
That's
yeah.
okay.
So that
Yeah,
this,
I
when
love
I
that.
saw
It's
this
fun.
cover, right? I had that. And I felt like when I touched the screen, I felt like a new mother touching the cheek of a newborn infant, like my wife would have done when her son was born, right?
That's a good way.
I think that's the closest I could feel.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it took 3 years, and my wife produced my wonderful son in 9 months' time, maybe a few days, give or take, 3 years. So, but when I saw the book cover, the feeling was, yeah, it's something I cannot even put words to.
Well, I think the first book is usually everyone has a reaction similar to that. That's a good one. So Michael Marola, is he here? Can we see him? I'd love to see Michael. You might want to ask you something. Okay, now I'm coming to the next question, and it is, how was your experience of your first book signing in a big chain store, which we all know it was Chapters, and I was with you, I think.
Yes, because Marian, you were the person sort of
doing a book signing.
Yeah, because you were the one who showed me the ropes, right? How to go about doing that.
But you showed me, you this great big stack
that
of
came
books
later
on the table, and you sold every single one of them. There's about 30. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So tell, for the benefit of other aspiring writers, what did you do to promote the selling of your book?
Mary Ellen, like when you told me that, that this book selling and that book signing events and all that, right? I was nervous, like to use Kate's phrase, beset with fears, right? What is going to happen? Are they going to, frown at me? Like what is going to happen? Because I had seen writers with a pile of books sitting even in a square one Coles, and all alone, I knew writing was solitary
Solitary.
profession, but to me, it seemed that book signing was equally solitary, right? With nobody there with his own pile of books, there would be a writer, but it didn't happen very often in the Square One Coles. But was my image of book signing. And when the very first time when I went, I remember that manager, right? They had these peel out labels that signed by the author. She just put 3 on 3 and said this would be enough, kind of, right? Then left it there. Wow, 3. And I promised my wife I'll sell at least 5, come what may.
So
Only 3. So first one year I stood there, generally like a lighthouse, watching this sort of. By then already people were dwindling, right? Bookstores were not that, with crowded with shoppers and all. This kind of all the buyers moving around, people wanting to buy whatever they want, hobbies and all. Men mostly coming in to go to the Starbucks, kind of, right? And they would pick up a magazine or 2. But women generally sort of browsing and all that. Then I thought it looks like they are not going to come, that old thing like, if the mountain does not come to, that kind of a thing. Then I went and approached a safe looking Indian lady and all. And then she was very excited about all the things I told her. And that's how I built up that spiel, right? About what I should be telling and then she bought a book and then that's how I started approaching, people and telling them about the contents of the book, that first book, right? About all the trials and the struggles of immigrants, but telling them there is humor too, because I didn't want to put them off about all those. And yeah, so that's how it started, selling. And the best thing was, I think in Calgary, Guernica had arranged 2 bookshops, and I had to do book signing at Chapters Indigo, which I did. And months later, I came to know that on Calgary Herald, my book turned up on the bestseller list at number 3.
that was
and
a
number 1 was Margaret Atwood. Just one day or whatever day's work, even that can, sort of create, that. And to be on a bestseller list, even for a fleeting second, was my childhood thought. In India, used to have Time, and I would read those at the last page of Time magazine, there would be that bestseller list, right? And I would wonder if I would just imagine a title and Reddy, right? At the end of it, they would always have only the last name. And many of my favorite writers would appear there. Just even for 1 week, somewhere that it should appear. That's, I would say, a big milestone in the dream journey, kind of, right? Even if not in that monetary journey of a writer, kind of, yeah.
No, well, that's it. I think when I was with you at the signings, I could tell you would set goals. I remember you'd say, okay, how many books have we got left to sell? And then he'd, set goals and say, okay, I'm going to sell. I remember you saying that to me. So that helped you too, didn't it? When you were setting goals about the number of books you were going to sell.
Yeah. It's sort of, like, it depends on how much you can sell. And also I like to share this with you all. I think at Eaton Center, they had arranged it in a place. I told them, right at the beginning, that this is not a good place and all that. So let's see. So that day, you were not there, and I think it was for Ramya's Treasure. So I sold only 13, and unlucky for some. But I spoke to that man. She said, so if they see that you're doing a good job, right, they are more than cooperative. So she said, was okay. So why don't you come back after a few months, and then you can put the table wherever you want. So I did that, and I moved the table just 3 feet. That's all I did. I moved the table 3 feet. I finished selling that entire pile by 3 o'clock. I said, thank you. And I left.
Well, you see the positioning of the table, it's little things.
Table is, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
it is.
less than, yeah.
That was it. I think, and I know after we finished our interview, Michael has a few questions. Did you find it difficult to balance an intensive day job and writing in the evening? This is from Michael.
Actually, I would write in the evenings or early mornings, right? First thing was I was new to country. You know, you have as that immigrant zeal, that kind of energy, and you have come here to do something. So I suppose those years I didn't find it. And the best thing about it was my company I worked for, they gloried in every small, whether I had a book, before the book was published, book reading in, what was that? There is that what is that street something there, or winning the Mississauga artists in the meeting, they put up the trophies, that picture of the trophy, they gloried, they still, you know, my managers come and they have this, you know. So therefore it was a very, it still does. I tell them about some event or something like that, and there is this good reaction and vibes, and people
were
buying
very
my books and very supportive. And, you know, so therefore I didn't feel, I felt that it was actually both where, and it should be, right? Your leisure, whatever your passion and your work should be melded, kind of, you know. I was lucky to have that kind of, I still do, you know, that carry with that, though Great West Life has changed its name to Canada Life, but, you know, there was this feeling of, you know, that how they celebrated everything which was happening.
But that's important in your work.
To me, yeah.
They did. They were interested enough, and they were supportive enough, and that really helps, you know, a new writer to, you know, to continue, you know, writing. Okay, I have another one, and we're going to be very shortly opening the floor to the audience, and but I want to introduce Michael as soon as we're done your publisher. Okay, now you write about the immigrant experience because you have lived it, and we always tend to write about what we know. Have you ever thought of changing topics, about writing about something altogether different? Has that entered your mind?
Mary Ellen, when I said I wanted to be a writer, right, I would always want, it is continuously changing scenario, right? So when I read Agatha Christie's and all those women writers of Great Britain, right, I thought I must write a mystery, you know, like them. When I read those thrillers by Alistair Helen Mackins and Eric Ambler, Graham Greene, I thought I must write espionage. This is that feeling of wanting to be a writer. But one thing I was sure, when in India, what would happen is that there is like I was leading a humdrum life, right? That they would say middle class or upper middle class or something. And then to write about those, it's not like it, I didn't feel inspired. But when I came to Canada and this entire set, I didn't mean to be an immigrant writer, or I don't want to be an immigrant writer all through my life. But when they happened, right, I found that there is a rich load to mine.
But you found your voice.
That is how, yeah. So who knows if I'm alive and I continue to write, I might still write that great detective story, you know, who knows?
Well, that's right. But
there are these plots, but one never knows, or, but, you know, like, but the thing is, a writer must react, right, to things that are happening around him. And then it is the environment which he internalizes and distills into his output, right? So I don't know from where that stimulus will come. I'm open to it.
But you're open to wherever it comes.
Yeah, wherever it comes. I don't want to be, you know, they say, hurled to a formula, right? Yeah, I'm writing immigrant stories. I've done some of them repetitious, but you know, who knows where this will take me, right? But I know all roads lead to your grave. So, but maybe, you know, maybe I should write maybe a very good piece of that, you know, for my tombstone. Even that would be a piece of writing.
Well, that's right.
And I would write a person, here lies someone who loved to read and loved to write.
Okay, we've got another question from your publisher. How much, do you want to put it up again, Michael? How much, why don't you ask him personally? Because we're going to start in a few minutes with our question and answer. Michael, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, that's
okay,
good.
Michael.
You talk directly to Pratab. This is, I'll introduce you.
How are you?
Okay, I'll introduce
fine.
you. This is Michael Barola, and he is the publisher for Pratab, Guernica Editions, and he's going to be one of the guest panelists on our April 30th presentation. Okay, go ahead now. Talk directly with Pratab.
I was just curious about, how much emphasis do you put on the form and style of your writing as opposed to the content of your writing, which is,
Yeah,
I guess it's a bit connected to what
yes.
Aaron was asking about what do you like to write? Are you only going to write about immigrants, in other words?
No, content is it? I might vary because the novel I started because of it is sort of getting bogged down. It's not about immigrants, it might interest people, but it's set essentially in India. So my novel which is third or fourth chapter kind of, it's not about him. But I want to speak about this style and form, right? Is when I was reading all these in India, right? It's after all a British Commonwealth country, and classics are part of your syllabus. And even if you did graduation, English was a subject everybody had to take in an English medium. It's not something you choose a second language. Again, even in in a university, you have to take two languages. You could choose the Indian language or French, but it's there. We read the classics and also. But for me, the writers I found was that they wrote very well. So when I told about this magician and all that, for example, these British mystery writers, right? Agatha Christie, we all love, but I was not so impressed with that. It was Marjorie Allingham and Ngaio Marsh. It's because of their style and characterization. For me, was very, very important. And Michael, when the editor came back to tell me that something she said, I forget the words, uncanny power of characterization, something like that she used. To me, that was it. Like, that's when I felt, oh God, I can be a writer, And for me, that form is very important, because I used to paint too. If the form is not important, how is it an art form at all? See, for many people would want to write, perhaps that's what the publishers want to, like a journalist would. And if you took an excerpt from Globe and Mail and you took an excerpt from Toronto Star, you wouldn't know which is which. I don't think, personal opinion, but who is Pratap to say that writing is an art form? So I think it should be that style is important, and then it should be very subjective. If I were to read Marjorie Allingham's prose, I would know at once it is not Agatha Christie's, right? So that's how, for me, style and form is important. And subjects you can choose, right? You strive for style. Therefore, you might have found my style was a bit wordy or little bit on the purple side, or very like that formal Indian English. But for me, it is a very important aspect of writing, because I think writing is an art form. It's not like journalism, a service. Yeah,
That's it. Michael, I think he answered your question. Michael,
And one more thing, Michael, sorry, I didn't know you were part of the audience. If I have bad mouthed you, please excuse me. Early in that.
Too late. It's too late.
Do you have anything else you'd like to ask Pratap? And then we're just going to open it up to the audience. So go ahead, because I think it's great. You want to have the vibes between your author and the publisher. And just kind of, are there any questions that come to your mind that maybe you could answer for some of our aspiring writers? Like, what is the relationship you have to build between the writer and the publisher?
Is it a question? Yeah, actually, I must say it's.
You can give your.
It should be of, no, in my case, all the good vibes were coming from Guernica, right? So I don't know how other publishers are. And so for me, it was a very, like
a positive
collaboration. And one never knows. There are publishers and publishers, people. And I know course of it, I have found people who were very, brusque and short, and there could be anything. So all I can say is it should be, end of the day, a good product must come out. Hopefully it must sell. It's in the interest of both the publisher and the writer that together we create a lovely product.
That's good you answered. Now let's go to Michael and we'll ask him. This is very important because I think people don't understand.
I think the relationship between a publisher and an author has to be first of all, a professional, and secondly, it has to be open, upfront, honest, transparent, and you know, a lot of times, the problem is that a lot of times promises are made that are not kept, or that you know, there's something while we're having the discussion about signing a contract. That's one thing. I always like to say that, you know, when an author sends us a book, it's like kneeling before the high priest or something. It's some poor, you know, please, 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 right? And then once we accept an author, the relationship should shift. It should become equal, and you know, and that makes a big difference when, you know. So that's the way we like it ideally, in an ideal world, is what we'd like to have as a relationship between us and our authors. It's not always that. It's not always the same. A lot of times, the author has to also step up, and Pratap has stepped up incredibly. He was one of the ones that, I mean, he was very enthusiastic about coming to meeting our publicist, having discussions with them about, you know, what can we do next? How can we do better? You know, all of that. That is something that's separate from the actual writing process. Some authors have it, other authors don't. I think in today's world, an author's job doesn't stop at the end of the signing of the contract and handing over a manuscript. I think it becomes even more important afterwards, so that a book, like, you know, like Pratap said, part of our thing is that we are a cultural entity, but at the same time, we're a business as well. We have to try to survive, and so we need both. So that's my thinking on the relationship between publisher and author today.
Well, it's worked out marvelous. And I know the big highlight of Pratap's writing career was when you sent him on his book tour out west to Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver. That was an amazing, wasn't it, Pratap? That was an amazing.
Yeah, for me, it was, you know, like a very enjoyable trip, though.
His book tour.
And I had so many good experiences, right? There was this in Winnipeg interview with, I think it was CTV. So from there, when I went a little later to the bookshop, already there was a customer waiting for me, you know, to set up my little shop there. So, you know, she had seen the interview and she wanted to come and like buy a book and have it signed by me. There were so many such instances. Yeah. So it was a great experience.
Okay, I think now we're going to open the floor totally. Michael, I'm so glad that you were here as well. I think it's good to see the relationship between an author and the publisher. I think you've built a very good, both of you have. And you hope that that's the case with most authors and their publishers, because I think some people are a little apprehensive. They think, oh, geez, how is it going to work? And you've made it work. So you have. Okay, we're going to open the floor now to the audience. So and speak directly to, instead of going through the chat, speak directly to Pratap. I think it's more personal. It worked with Michael and Pratap. So please, we'll open the floor now. We've got half an hour for a question and answer session from our audience. So please go ahead.
One of the questions on the chat line is, how much did the Humber Writers course help you in terms of publishing the first book and improving your writing?
Since there are two parts, right? I had a great mentor in Elizabeth Harvest, so I learned a lot.
A lot from her.
Yeah, from her. But in getting published, I told you that, you know, there was that kerfuffle about that not being a collection of stories was hard to sell and all that, you know. So it was so much difficult. Then it was all like, you know, it was my efforts that led me to getting published. And but then there were so many good things about the program, right? And at least I felt that, you know, that in one place when Elizabeth Harvest said you're a born storyteller or something like that, though I paid a hefty is through my nose. But it is nice because these writers are not going to sort of, just give praises, shower praises on you, because there must have been a grain of truth in that. So it sort of, there was a question on confidence, sort of bolstered my confidence and belief that I can, write. I can be a writer, sort of. Yeah. It has, depends how you see it, right? I could get, and I see a lot of positive things that I gained from that, but it didn't lead to getting published. Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
There's another question. If we'd like to read some of your short stories, where could we find them or buy them? The compilation.
They're available in Chapters, Indigo, Amazon, from Guernica's website itself, if they're still there. You could order from there. And
Hold up your second.
yeah,
book.
and
The audience didn't see it. Have you got your second book? Yes,
this
you
is-
just held up the first.
yeah,
Grandma's
this
Treasure.
is my second book. The first book has got more humor, and they're easy, in the days of Twitter and Flickr and all those things. They're short stories, easily digestible and all. This is it's like a long haul, and it's sort of the trajectory is the story of starts with a single woman, right, who faces a lot of challenges, and end of it, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. So it needs sort of a strong stomach to, yeah. But if you're going to buy it and read it,
That was a challenge to
good.
write because you were writing from a woman's point of view, weren't you?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
when I thought of something challenging, right, what I thought of was, there are two things about. First is, it's so difficult for an Indian woman who comes, because 100% of the choice, that went into the choice was the husband. It happens. I cannot even imagine, even for fiction, that the husband are both hatching a plot to come. It has happened. I know some people it came, but most of the time it's the husband who comes. They come here and then discover he's a man. He's a general manager, deputy general manager somewhere, having a cushy life in India. He comes here and they're operating from so how much he has to be there? She would have either a career or servants to help her, and then a support system. And here, all alone, and winters and this, and learning about wearing snow boots and all kinds of things. So for me, she was the most vulnerable piece in this journey of immigration, right? So what, as with writers' license, I put few more, which I discovered, challenges to her life. So, single woman, or separated recently, and the novel begins with losing a job, and then how she, that the arc of the story, right? 200 pages or so, how she lands up at a more comfortable place, sort of. So that is the plot of that novel. And one strange thing happened when I was getting mentored, right? Many people couldn't, many of the Indians will know Pratap Reddy is definitely a man, but the writers didn't know. So many of these stories, right? Many of these stories actually are what my wife would bring from a workplace, sort of. Not that full story, the germ of an idea, right? So I would write this about often, because she would bring those nuggets of. So, and I would write, and then the mentored, because the first story is about Mango Fool and all that, being set in, where the protagonist was a woman, presumed I was a woman. And when these stories came with men as security guards, and this man, single man, coping with a difficult child, they asked me, who are you? Almost, who are you? Are you a man or a woman? Kind of. So I knew that, there was this, there is a ring of, when there is that, as a writer, you need to imagine, right? So though Jane Austen said something like, a woman could never write about what men speak to each other when you are not there. That's a female writer is not there. So, but this was contrary.
You learned
to
that you
many
could.
people sort
You
of
could-
thought
you
it
could
was
write
a woman
that way.
who was-
Yeah.
yeah.
That's good. Now, we're going to have another question. It's not going through the chat line. I would just like people to just speak with you directly. Okay, Ivy Reese is here, who's a member of our group. Is there anyone else who would like to speak directly and ask a question with Pratap?
I would.
I find it's more personal. Yes, Ken.
Yep. Yep. Which ways did you find you tended to sell most books?
Which was the place, is it?
Which place
site?
or what method? Like in book signings, or did you do readings at a library or something
See.
and then sell books?
First thing, I've been reading at the library for many years. Okay, even before I became a published writer, library is the wrong place to sell books. In fact, on one occasion, I was the top seller when I sold 5 books. That's all. From morning till evening, you're there, or sometimes they made it. Library, because people are not coming there to buy books. They're coming there to borrow books. So library is never a great place to sell, and it is from experience. Book signings, yes, because people go to chapters. Many of them go to chapters. There are 3 kinds of customers: people who want to come to buy gifts, they are the majority; people who want to go to Starbucks; and then people who want to buy books. So chapters is a very good place to sell, when it depends, like how you go about doing it. And there was a place I could sell 28 books, and it just happens sometimes. The same location later on. It depends on season also. If it's a very bright, nice summer day, you won't find anybody in the book. Who will want to go to a musty
That's right.
bookstore?
They're at the cottage.
Yeah. So it depends on the time and all that. Yeah.
That's it. Okay. Okay.
Eileen wanted to ask a question too. Eileen?
Okay,
Yes,
good.
hi. Thank you, Pratap, for sharing your story. I find that your story is very humbling and inspiring. I had a question about whether or not you have a literary agent. It didn't seem like you talked about it. And if you don't have a literary agent, would you ever consider one, and what your thoughts are on that?
Yes. In fact, in my notes, I have made, like I have this point about literary agents. If many new writers, I would say don't depend on having a literary agent, because it's all finances, right? If you're the literary agent is going to think how much money you get, say 10% or 15%, and the literary agent has a cut of that. So they won't be very enthusiastic about hiring, and you should end up waiting for a literary agent. You first time writers, if you strike, that pay dirt, and if you are lucky, then fine, a literary agent will definitely be able to get you a more remunerative publisher. That's for sure. But don't wait for them. The same, yeah. So I try for literary agents, but maybe I have not gone all out. So if somebody accepts, and then it's all about, getting maybe first thing is about a publisher with with a wider reach, so they sell more copies. Secondly, it would be about they know the legal, people have been talking about all about contracts and all that, right? They know, hopefully they will be, safeguarding your interests. Who knows, down the road, your short story might become a television series, or, then when it happens that you might be getting a better cut, that kind of a thing. Literary agents are helpful if you are looking to a career of writing, right? They have their place and function in this world of publishing, but you don't have, with the very first book or something, don't wait for a literary agent to materialize, complete your work and try to push it. And even try literary agents. If they one look and they like your prose or your verse or whatever it is, so you might be lucky, but don't depend on it. So too with query letters with only 3 chapters. Try to get that book finished, so that again there could be people who are successful with just 1 chapter, who have written 1 chapter and the promise of 20 more of equally resplendent chapters to come. But so my thing, first wannabe writers, is it's your book that's going to speak for you, right? That entire book.
Okay,
So
rather than the agent.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I've always heard that if you end up going to an American publisher, a US publisher, that you might need an agent. But that depends on, that depends on the publisher.
It's so with Canadian also. That's why spoke about this book. It tells you clearly that, for example, for penguins, you need agented submissions, right? For example.
So some of the publishers.
Some of the
ask for
publishers mention clearly that it has to come through agents, even in Canada.
Okay,
Yes,
all
Sangha.
right.
Okay, that's good. So let's open the floor again
Thank
and
you.
directly approach Pratap and ask questions. We probably have about 10 minutes and then we'll have to do our wrap up with Pratap. Okay, go ahead. Anyone who would like to ask Pratap a question?
Serena? Serena?
Serena here. Thanks, Pratap. My first introduction was your story, Lime Tree. Thanks for sending it out and loved it. As a first generation immigrant myself who has just started writing, your story has been very, very encouraging. Quick question. When you talk about royalties from a traditional publisher, what percentage of royalties or a range would one expect for your first publication?
From what I gathered, is 10% or 50 in that region, and you get free 10 copies of your book. And often they would give you an advance. Sometimes advance, if you want, you can take it in form of books, also physical books, because you will always be called out, you will be invited to books, whatever, book reading and all that, where you can sell your books and all that. I heard 10 to 15%, there could be others, there are publishers and there are these famous celebrities who are not writers at all, but they seem to be producing books. So I don't know, but I heard 10, 15%. Yeah.
Thank you.
And,
Okay, does anyone else? I think we only have about 5 minutes and then we'll have Pratap do his wrap up. Okay, is there any one more question that you want to pose directly to Pratap? Go ahead, anyone in the audience?
I have one. You kind of spoke. Oh, first of all, thank you. I really admire your articulation. You speak in a way that is a bit poetic, and just in the metaphors that you use. And I just want to ask. You did mention it, but how do you kind of strike the balance in like keeping your work as original and in your voice versus like trying to make people understand it? And like, should you compromise? Like, for example, I find myself wanting to translate things or explain them or adding a glossary. Does it take away from your work or does it help you access an audience?
see, glossaries were very popular when I was growing up, right? Nowadays, it's not there at all, almost, and it's better not to have. Even if you think back of our student days, all those textbooks would have those, what do they call them? Diacritical marks or whatever. Those are numbers for footnotes. How many times we went back and referred and all that. And, fiction is a place where both the author has used his imagination and the reader is enjoying his imagination being stimulated. They can understand very often those. I was writing with Hindi words. In fact, some of the mentors said, don't even italize those Indian words and all that, right? People get the drift of it. And while we were reading, how many times did we stop because we didn't understand a word like adumbrate in Charles Dickens or epistolial in Nayomash or something like that, we didn't understand. Did we go to a dictionary? We just go through. So I would think glossaries are distracting with those mind. But if there is a need, you think very much, then go. This is my sixpence worth, in that I don't think you need glossaries and all. Another thing is you must, about that level you find, right? About your style shouldn't be forbidding or formidable, right? That it people shy away from it. Sort of you arrange six syllable words in a 15 word sentence, sort of. It might, but at the same time, how lowest, down can you go? So you can't simply think by most people enjoying it that many people will like that style, right? It will come over time, I think, when you read out your poems or if your stories or poems, how people are reacting around you, sort of. And it must be you will develop it. It's kind of a sixth sense which you get And when you, after some time, the best, a good thing is after you've written the story or whatever, read it aloud to yourself, right? How does it sound? So it should, whatever it is, it should be very pleasant to the ear, right? So it should not be, and you must, and how would, it will give you an idea of how the reader might be reacting to it, kind of. But that's lowering it to the lowest, it's not you, right? It becomes the audience, right? In writing, it's a lot about right, is about yourself, right? How many times we think, oh, I love Agatha Christie's. Do we not necessarily say, I like British mystery fiction, and by meaning, it's that you said, oh, I like Margaret Miller or Margaret Atwood or whoever. So it is you. So I would say, don't make it all things to all people in your audience, right? Retain your individual style, that whatever, that essential you must be there in your poem or prose. It's my sixpence worth. Huh? There are great, people who have they sold millions of copies, so they will have a different take, and quite rightly. But this is mine, since you have asked this question.
That's great, Pratap, thanks. So we're just about out of time for our question period, but you have about 5 minutes now for you want to leave us with your parting words, advice for an aspiring writer. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, if you want, all I can say is write, whatever it is, start writing. Don't wait for that glorious day or wait until I retire. Write when that, stop thinking about anything, but just go to your writing table, and if you have a laptop, or if not, a scrap of paper, start writing. That's it. A writer must, first writing comes before the writer becomes a writer. Start writing. It doesn't matter. Put your thoughts onto paper, and you will improve by and by. Just as you start, when you were a baby, you were crawling before you could walk. So many things happen. That's how it's going to be. Start writing. And at the same time, I would say, read too. Read because that was why you wanted to be a writer. That's where the pleasure, where you find that, that skillful authors, the way they write, and read. And also read because you will know how the contemporary writers, how they are handling their subjects. And this is how, if I come from another century and I try to write like who wrote Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte or something, people might not want to read it. Publishers will not want to, that kind of a thing. So read to know how, how modern writers are writing. Read to know, to get your own inspiration. So write and read. That's the two things. That's all I can say. And then, try become part of a writing community, so you have a network. This is very important. In almost every aspect of life nowadays, networking is important. So I would say, first write, continue to read, network. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Networking is, I think you're absolutely right. And because writing is such a solitary profession, and you can't be an island unto yourself. You have to get community support, and you did. You went after it, didn't, and it helped you. You mentioned that, and we hear it in our group often, that people are very pleased that they have come to a writers group, and they grow as a result of it, and I think the people in the group grow too. So Pratap, is there anything else you want to leave us with? Okay,
no,
well, I just want to say thank you so much. You were marvelous, because I think you brought everything down to everyone's level. And I mean, you started the hard way, and you're an immigrant to Canada, and you've proved to be a very successful writer. You have 2 traditionally published books to your credit, and I think you're happy about that. And of course, you're writing another novel, aren't you? I'm sure. Are you writing another novel?
Trying to write, yeah.
Yes. So you've got another novel. Okay, we won't ask what the subject is, but that's it. And as you indicated, it isn't a cakewalk, to get published, whether you do it self-publishing or traditionally. However, anything is possible, I think, when you have the passion and the drive and you're willing to work hard at honing your writing craft. And I'm just going to thank the audience too. They were really terrific. There were some great questions and they were thought-provoking questions. And you appear to be very keen on navigating through the channels, the challenges and going through the channels until you reach your goal of becoming a traditionally published author. So don't give up. And I wish you all the success in your writing life, to all of those in our audience. And I want to thank, there's many of our Courtney Park Writers Group people attending too, and I think they were very happy to support you. And I also want to thank the Mississauga Arts Council for hosting this presentation, and I want to show my appreciation to the TD Bank for sponsoring this online event, as the TD Bank, they certainly realize that the arts is very important. That's it. Now I think we can take it back to Susan.
Thank you, Pratap.
Thank
you,
Thank
Marielle.
you. Thank you,
That's
Michael.
great. And thank you for being with us. Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
so glad.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Well, one
So
thing
I'd just like to, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
One thing I'd like to add too is, as much as we think we're writers and all that, which we all are, the writing becomes the product of who we are. We also have to realize we are a product too. We need to be addressing what we need, to form our different ideas, to form our different ways of writing, and to be able to be confident enough to read our work to people and to be out there and meeting different people and interacting. So realize that you are important in this too, not just your books.
Good
Okay.
point. Good point, Elizabeth. Now we'll put it back over to Susan. She's going to be doing a wrap up.
Thank you, Mary Ellen and Pratap. This was a wonderful interview, and I'm sure our participants found it very informative. I would like to extend a thank you to today's sponsor, TD Bank Group. The Mississauga Arts Council would also like to thank Courtney Park Writers Group and Mississauga Writers Group for their involvement in the development and presentation of this workshop. We hope that you have enjoyed today's workshop and look forward to seeing you on April 30th for day 2 of our TD Culture Lab Explore Publishing workshop. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.